I guess this is what it feels like taking a train in Italy. We're a few minutes delayed, but that shouldn't ruin the fun. So, yeah, this talk is called The Science of Code Reviews, which is, of course, a clickbait title. But, of course, I will be telling you something about code reviews, and hopefully either you will get started after this talk, or you have some small improvements, or maybe even help me improve my code reviews if you have some feedback. So, yeah, my name is Rick Kulpers. You can find me on Twitter at rskulpers. I'm a developer. I work for a company called Enrise. Sorry for the big picture, by the way. I didn't expect the screen to be this big. So I work for a company in the Netherlands. I'm Dutch. The company is located in Amersfoort, which is sort of in the center. I maintain a Twitter account called phpDay. If you want to know anything about shortcuts, it's a very useful Twitter account. There's a bunch of GIFs on there, so should be easy to follow. I run a user group, PHP Amersfoort, which I don't think any of you will care about, unless you somehow end up in the Netherlands. I'm a developer, speaker, and of course, I like my game every now and then. So usually I don't do these introductions at the beginning of my talk, because the talk is not about me, it's about the content. However, for this talk, I thought it'd be fun to tell you how I got started in code reviews. So before I started working at Enrise, I was working for a different company, and the company was working on small to medium-sized websites and web shops. So some of them were landing pages, and some of them were just bigger web shops. And you know, some of them were very limited in budget, so it was sort of just build, deliver, or build and ship, and that's basically the cycle we were going through. We did have ambitions to move on to bigger projects, but you can't simply move on to bigger projects. You need to have the actual knowledge to do so. So I started learning, you know, unit testing was the first time I wrote a unit test. And eventually we started getting bigger projects, but I felt lost. There was a certain feedback loop that was missing. So a few months later, I actually went to this island here. And this island, some of you may recognize, it's an island somewhere in the Netherlands, and this is where an event called WeCamp is held. So who knows WeCamp? Anyone? A few people. Okay, so WeCamp is a 5-day coding retreat. And basically, you get put on this island with a bunch of other developers, and then you fight till the end. No. You get put into different teams, and each team has a coach. So this coach is supposed to help you reach your goals. You can go there with any goal. You can say, I want to do more speaking, and then the coach can help you out, and you can perhaps do the presentation at the end of the 5 days, or you can go there saying, I want to learn more about Symfony, something very specific, and then, well, we can do a project in Symfony. So the idea is that you think of a project within the 5 days, you work on it, and you finish it, and then you present it on the last day. I was put together with this guy. Not sure if I was too happy about it, but this is Stefan. He's a German, he's a speaker. Some of you might recognize him. So he was basically my coach. First time I really properly met him, awesome guy, great fun to work with. Then we also had Ellen, who back then worked for Macman Digital, now works for something purple. I forgot the name, I'm sorry. And Richard, who's actually now my colleague at Enrise, and back then he was also working for Enrise. So this was a relatively small team, but they're all awesome individuals. So now the task was to think of a project. So we came up with Meetspire, which is absolutely the worst name you could think of, but there's a reason why it's called Meetspire. We were thinking about, we were all meetup organizers, but meetup.com at the time, this was August 2014, was making some really, actually they're making bad mistakes now as well, but they were making some really bad choices. They were removing features that we wanted, and it was all in all a little bit of a bad platform. So we wanted to create something that was open source, because yay, open source. So we thought of Meetup and Inspire, and we just put them together. We had Meetspire. Considering you're an island, all you have is satellite connection. So imagine the first day where people started pulling vagrant boxes massively and basically took the entire internet down. But eventually we had our environments up and running, we had our BitBuckets, and we had a project. Now, one of the first things that Richard, this guy here, says is, what do you think about code reviews? I was like, we have like 4 days to deliver this project. Do you really want to do code reviews? This is really a good idea. But I was like, you know, screw it. I want to learn something, so I might as well do code reviews. Turns out those code reviews were actually the most useful thing from the entire trip. There were so many discussions. You started to learn from each other, from each other's mistakes as well. And it just gave you lots of great insights. And the nice thing about it, because you have very short time, you continuously, it basically helps to get your team aligned. You continuously learn from each other, and the direction is, continuously updated. So that was a very nice way for me to get introduced into code reviews. And of course, with code reviews come GIFs, and this was the first GIF I put down on BitBuckets. But more importantly, we were no longer just learning from our own mistakes, but also from each other's mistakes, which is something very, very valuable. All right, so that was the introduction. What exactly is a code review? Now, this is some sort of formal definition, but basically, you go look at your colleague's code before it actually gets pushed into the master branch or whichever branch, and you look for improvements, whether that is a bug to fix, whether that is performance, security, anything. So why would you do code reviews? One of the main, well, this is in no particular order, but one of the reasons is readability. When you write code, you may think it's readable, but of course you're the person writing it, so it's readable for you. The only way to check if it's readable is having someone else read it. That makes sense, right? So readability is one of the major points of doing code reviews, to make sure your code can be maintained as well when you leave the company. Of course, architecture. During our projects, we think about architecture at the start, and then we implement the feature, but where is the check whether we did it right or not? This is where a code review could be a solution, where you have a point in time where you can say, all right, let's see what you build, and let's have a look and see and reevaluate whether this is still the right choice. Of course, like I said, with the WeCamp, we got our team aligned in a short period of time. Sharing knowledge is very important, and this is something you continuously do, because if you, for example, do a code review for every feature, you always have this knowledge shared among the team. And if you do it on, let's say, GitHub, it is also automatically documented, right? So you can actually look back from a commit and see the discussions that went on to make this decision. And knowing how a decision came to place is way more important than the actual decision itself. It's the process that really, really gives you great insights. And of course, low-hanging fruit there, bugs. When you do a code review, you look for simple bugs to pick out and fix. Now, there are multiple types of code reviews, actually. So here you see two. This one being like remote pull request type of code review, and this one being pair programming. I'll first zoom in a little bit on the pull request review. So basically, if you're using some version control system, who's using SVN here? Okay, still a few people. I think SVN also has a few tools. I think Garrett is an SVN review tool. I'm not too sure. If you're using Git, then most of you probably be familiar with GitHub, BitBuckets, and GitLab. And you can see here at the top you have a simple title, which is just a description of your feature. Usually you put in like a ticket number, like a Jira ticket number in there as well, so you can trace where it actually came from. Here you see the branches being committed into, from which branch, and then you have a description which you can put in anything you like. Actually, GitHub has a way of putting a template into your repository, which is kind of useful. So in this case, as a description, the changes that are proposed, and there's also a picture there for visual feedback. And this is what it looks like for BitBucket, and this is what it looks like for GitLab. So it's pretty much all the same. Now, you also have pair programming, which is a little bit different. Basically, you have a driver, this person. I know the slides are a bit dark, but you can see people, right? You don't have to identify them. There's one person there, person here. So you have a driver and you have a navigator, and basically the driver is coding, is working on the code and can focus on that particular task. And then you have the navigator who's sort of looking at the bigger picture. right? Are we making the right decisions here? Are we introducing any bugs in any other aspects of our system? Actually splitting these tasks is very useful, because as a driver you can just focus on the code you're writing at hand. You don't have to think about everything around it at that point in time. So you can optimize your code, and then the navigator can keep track of everything else. Now, there are, of course, you do this informally in your company when you say, hey, you know, I've got this issue. You grab a colleague, can you come look at this issue, and then we can figure it out. But you also have more formal pair programming where you do it for nearly every feature. Is there anyone who does pair programming for every feature? I know there are a few teams that do. Yeah, there you go. It's definitely a very effective way of working, because basically what you're doing, you're creating the shortest possible feedback loop you can get. It doesn't get any shorter than that. You have someone sitting next to you, and you can immediately check whether what you're building is something that actually makes sense. Sort of the problem, well, my personal problem with pair programming is it can be very, very exhausting. So I'm a pretty introverted guy, and my thoughts are kind of weird, and sometimes I can't really follow them myself. And if I have to continuously explain my thoughts to the person next to me, you know, I'm dead after 8 hours. So it can be very, very exhausting. But I do know there's a lot of people that actually work better this way, for which it may be interesting for their team. And it's also a little bit hard to convince management, because on paper it looks very inefficient. But if you have good management, they also know that it drastically improves your quality. Now, another crazy concept here. Who knows about mob programming? Who does mob programming? All right. How are you liking it? So okay. Yeah. So mob programming, it's a little bit different. You have well, there's a bunch of people on the screen now. You have one person there who's the driver, and then you have multiple navigators. If you were to sit in a car with one driver and multiple navigators, I'm not sure you would end up in the right place. But it has its uses. So I don't have any personal experience, I'll say that up front. But I can imagine that if you have this very complex problem to tackle, it might be a good idea to just start as a group and just crunch all these solutions and think about possible ways of tackling this problem. But I don't really see it as something that is integrated part of your workflow, right? But I would love to hear success stories. So moving on to the next topic. So SmartBear, a company, has conducted a survey with, I believe it was, 600 software professionals, and they asked, what is the best way of improving software quality? Now, there's a top 3. I'm going to let you guess which the top 3 are. So any guesses here? The best way of improving software quality? Testing, all right, that's well, it's basically 2 of them already. Because unit testing and functional testing was separate. And then what's the number 1? Come on, guys, I'm literally having a talk about this. Are you guys paying attention at all, or? Oh, there you go. Code reviews, of course. So code reviews was actually it came out on top, which I thought was cool. So I thought, well, you know, I can do a survey as well. I'm a person. I can write questions. So I conducted a survey, which is more focused on how developers experience code reviews. Before I start showing these numbers, I gotta say there's a huge amount of selection bias going on here, because I made the survey, I put it on my Twitter, but of course the people that I reach are way more likely to do code reviews than it's not a good target group that I had for my survey. So this first question is absolutely bogus. The percentages that come out of here are not to be trusted. But who here has colleagues review their code? Then why are you here? No, it's okay. So basically, 73. It's kind of matches actually the audience here. 73% says yes. Then you have 17% only when I ask, and then you have a few people that have we use pair programming as a form of code review, or no, we only rely on automated tools. No, a tester only functionally tests the code, or simply no. So this question is not very useful for us, but this question: do you feel like you learn a lot from giving and receiving code reviews? So who feels like they don't learn anything from giving and receiving code reviews? Oh, there's a few people. Okay, that's interesting. You're part of the 4%. No, so 96% says yes, I do feel like I learned something from giving and receiving code reviews, and 4% says no, which is okay. And I hope to maybe convince you that it doesn't have to be the case. That you can definitely learn stuff from this. I have another question. Do you enjoy getting your code reviewed? Who doesn't enjoy getting their code reviewed? Yeah, also a few people. Okay. That's a very. I should have asked that. That's a very fair point. So, yeah, we have an overwhelming 87% who says yes. We have 13% here who says usually, but sometimes I find it hard to accept feedback or deal with criticism. So who identifies with the 13%? Yeah, it's a few people. I'll be honest, I in the beginning, I definitely identified with the 13%. It was different for me. I came from an environment where we weren't really looking at each other's code, and you know, there were no code reviews. So code got into production, and then later on you have to edit it, and then you do an SVN blame, and you're like, oh, that guy, okay. So it was very confronting when I first started doing code reviews. To zoom on that a little bit more, there's this term called Egoless Programming. And this is basically a definition. I'll read it out to you. So developers need a robust enough ego to trust and defend their work, but not so much ego that they reject suggestions for better solutions. Similarly, the egoless reviewer should have compassion and sensitivity for their colleagues, if only because their rules will be reversed one day. So notice how it zooms in on egoless programming, but that egoless programmer is a whole different thing, right? As a programmer, you need to have somewhat of an ego if you want to stand there and defend your work. That's what it says in the first sentence. But the actual code that you produce should not contain any ego. It should be open for any suggestions, any change, and you don't want to protect that too much, right? So there's actually this thing called the 10 Commitments of Egoless Programming, which is a little bit of a sidestep, but I'll go through them because there are some very good points in there. So the first one says, understand and accept that you will make mistakes. Well, frankly, mistakes are the best tool to learn, in my opinion. You are not your code, so it's egoless programming, not the egoless programmer. So accept any feedback or criticism that's done on your code. Don't take it personal, right? No one is trying to attack you personally. Well, some people are trying to attack you personally, but the majority of people don't try to attack you. So no matter how much karate you know, someone else will always know more, which is great. You can learn from other people, right? Accept the fact that they know more and use that to your advantage. Don't rewrite code without consultation. So who here has ever rewritten a piece of code because it simply wasn't their style? I'm admitting, oh, everyone admits. It's like a confession booth. Okay, so basically when you see a piece of code and you're like, it's not really the way I would write it, don't simply rewrite it. Instead, look at the author, approach that person, and come with good arguments on why you would rewrite the code. And PSR is a valid argument, but I hate loops is not a valid argument. But yeah. Treat people who know less than you with respect, deference, and patience. I think that's very, very obvious. I hope it is to you as well. The only constant in the world is change. Embrace the change. If you write code, don't expect it to run for 5 years untouched. It'll change almost every day. The only true authority stems from knowledge, not from position. So this is a very interesting one. Basically, if you're an intern at a company, or if you're a junior developer, the whole, how do I explain this? It's very important that people appreciate your knowledge. And it doesn't matter where you are on the ladder or whatever you want to call it. If you have knowledge about a certain subject, and you have the most knowledge about that subject in the company, then you're the authority on that. It doesn't matter if you're a senior, lead, junior, intern, it doesn't matter, right? Knowledge is what really matters, and that's what makes the difference. Fight for what you believe, but gracefully accept defeat. So as programmers, we like to argue. I've got myself arguing and then realizing, damn, that guy has a point. And then still trying to defend my points, and I was like, no, this is a lost cause. accept defeat, right? So if halfway through a discussion you're like, he has a fair point, accept it, and also when you win an argument or any other situation, don't use the terms "I told you so." It doesn't really make a nice environment. Don't be the guy in a room, which in this case refers to the person that sits down behind their computer with their coffee, puts their headphones on, and then doesn't talk to anyone, doesn't socialize, doesn't ask for help, doesn't do anything. It's not good for the environment. And of course, critique code instead of people. Be kind to the code, not to the code. Again, this is Egoless Programming, not programmer. So I see a bunch of people taking pictures, so I'm just going to wait here. Or not. No, if you want to take a picture, yeah. We have plenty of time. Okay. So what to look for during a code review? So one of the most obvious things, of course, are the unhappy paths. As a developer, I mean, I kept catch myself developing a feature and then be like, it works, and it's like, I don't really want to know what actually breaks because of this feature. I'm just going to push it and let the reviewer review it. But basically, you always deal with unhappy paths, right? If something goes wrong, make sure the system gracefully does something, or logging, or whatever. So this is one of the key items that you're looking for during a code review. Challenge whatever the developer built. Of course, we have the test added, which is somewhat of an open door. One way of spotting this easily is by using code coverage. And I'm not talking about 100% code coverage, I'm talking about relative code coverage, where you see trend, where you see whether the code coverage is increasing or decreasing. And if it's decreasing, then you can actually step in, and or you can mention it to the developer, and we can improve it. Is the feature implemented according to specs? If you make a pull request, you have the description, right? So you can fill in whatever. But it's important to check whether that actually matches the story it's based on, right? Did the developer have the same interpretation of the story as you did and as the product owner did, right? It's something very important to check. Check the sources. Performance. It kind of depends on your project. If micro optimizations are important, using what's a fun micro optimization? Float val instead of float typecasting. There's actually a difference. This might be something that's very important to look at. Or if you see a query executed in a loop, all these things are signals that this might not perform very well in bigger scale. So check for it. And of course, ideally, you would have automated performance tests. But who here has automated performance tests? Exactly. So a very fun one, security. Has anyone here read about the WannaCry thing, that the virus that went wrong, the ransomware? Yeah. So it turns out that there is an exploit somewhere in the SMB protocol, and a bunch of computers are infected right now, which is very fun. Windows XP is also infected, which took down, which created some problems at the NHS, which is the the healthcare in Great Britain. Sorry. Yeah, exactly. There's a bunch of stuff going wrong right there, and apparently the fix or the kill switch is a domain that if they register it, then the virus turns itself off. So some random guy registered the domain and it killed the virus on a bunch of computers, which is really insane. But you don't want to be the people that have that security hole. So take care of security. We're so used to working with database abstraction layers and all these other abstractions which actually protect us from security, but it also makes us a little bit lazy. So keep track of it. Another way is using the I think Sensio Labs built the Composer security checker, which you can run on your Composer JSON, and it checks for packages with known security issues. So let's move on to code review etiquette. I'm pretty sure you didn't know this existed, and I made it up, so it doesn't really exist. I think it's very important the way you communicate on code reviews, because communication is half the work of a code review. So I have some examples. So this here is a Magento module. I looked up pull requests through like hundreds of, well, I say hundreds, like tens of repositories. And here he's commenting on a white space and says, well, it has like 2 paragraphs on the extra white space. And then the guy or the guy or girl in red says, that was simply a mistake made when adding my code. So the thing I learned from this is don't jump to conclusions, right? Just keep it short. You can sort of make the assumption that it probably didn't mean to put the extra white space there. Just ask, why is there an extra white space? And then you wouldn't have to write 2 paragraphs. Save some letters. Here you have person red say, please use /* var link for the class properties. And then person blue says, I'm sorry, but I don't think this is the right convention for this. This has not been managed by CS Fixer tools. Do you have a link about it? I'm curious. And then the person red says, it's fine. Person blue says, fine what? And it says, it's fine to put it on 1 line. So this is very, very bad communication. So use your words, right? You don't have to be super elaborate like in the first example, but find like a middle way. Because if you leave a comment like this on open source, it can take a few days because there's usually a bunch of pull requests. So try to be clear. Yeah, here we have an example in, I think it's Laravel, where a person red says, you can't use the file exists function, you must call function on the file's object. Now person blue didn't quite understand it, so he wrote a whole book. And person red says, not sure you understand what I meant, this class can't know, yada, 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 yada. So what I take from this is use examples. The only common language we all speak here is PHP. So why not use PHP to explain what you mean, right? GitHub has great code formatting, code syntax highlighting. Use it. One example would have resolved this. And of course, a thank you is not very unimportant. So when you merge a pull request, always make sure to thank the contributor because it's people's time. And it's valuable time. And let's not forget about the GIFs. So this is my colleague leaving a GIF on one of my pull requests. So for who is this the first GIF they've seen today? No one. Second. Did I have one in the beginning? Oh, for who is this the second GIF they've seen today? A few people. Okay, well, I'm going to up your dosage a little bit. Yes, this one's definitely my favorite. He's fabulous. Yeah, let's skip that. Important thing to know, with code reviews, you own the code as a team. As soon as you click that merge button, you own it as a team. So you're responsible for it as a team. So make sure you use that in your wording. We should probably check this, or we should change this instead of directly aiming for the contributor. You're responsible as a team. Just because that person implemented a certain way doesn't mean it's also, per definition, his responsibility to fix it. Hell, you can even do a patch onto that person's code review, or you can do a pull request on top of a pull request. That's also fine. But work on it together. And of course, trigger their thoughts. There are a lot of people that, and definitely when you're just starting as an intern or a junior, some people aren't too keen on expressing their opinions or don't feel like they really have a right to say anything. So trigger them to say what they think. It's very valuable. Some people that are very quiet can say the most brilliant things. So getting started, how do you actually get started with code reviews? One of the first steps would be, if you want to do it the pull request way, is to introduce some sort of branching. There was a branching talk, I think, yesterday. Basically, yeah, introduce branching so you have like a master branch and maybe a feature branch or however you want to do it. But that way you can start making your pull requests. And of course also automate the menial tasks, like code style checks and linting, because no one wants to look at that and deal with that. So you have a bunch of tools, PHP CS Fixer, PHP CS, PHP MD, linting PHP-L. So automate all that stuff so you can actually focus on the functionality and the actual problem at hand. And of course, let everyone participate. Code reviews is not a privilege you get. It's not only for a lead developer or whatever. Let everyone do code reviews because it's one of the most valuable ways of sharing knowledge. So why not do it with everyone? And also give everyone the right to merge. Now, some people might say like, no, we shouldn't do that because then we'll have juniors merging. Basically, what we do at our company is if we have someone new join the team, the first 2 weeks or the first sprint or whatever, we ask them to do the code reviews and leave the feedback. And actually, it's usually one of the first things they do at our company. And but don't click the button yet. And then after a sprint, we can check, and usually we're confident enough that that person should have the right to merge. Now, of course, if you're already doing code reviews, you're like, yeah, I already know this. So how do I actually improve my code reviews? So one way is, which is something that we do, is code and functional reviews. Doing a code review gives you great insight. This is insight that a tester doesn't have. So why not do a small functional review next to it? Right? You know the input, the function state. You know the processes that go on the background. You can do a functional review and you can try to break it in ways that the tester might not even have thought of. What we actually did was we had a big enough team to do this, where we had the rule that we would do 2 code reviews and 1 functional. And basically the first person who would come on the pull request would do a code review, and if comments come out of that, they're resolved. And the second person who comes on there does a code review and a functional review. But that's something for you to decide for yourself, of course. Of course, code reviews usually result in discussions, and we love to argue. So make sure you get a third opinion. If you have a discussion between 2 people, there's no point, because you know that this person on this side, this person on this side. So get a third opinion and make it a rule that whatever the third person says, that's the direction you're going to take, unless he says a completely other direction. But that's sort of an edge case. So whatever that third person decides, that's the way you're going to go, because there's no point on getting stuck on these discussions, right? The product owner doesn't like it, the customer doesn't like it, and developers eventually also don't like it. Keep the changes small, very important. There's this thing called cognitive load, which is, I believe, the amount of things you can keep in your working memory. And you want to keep that as small as possible, so there's more space for creative thinking and trying to see and find ways to improve the code, right? So keep your changes small. Don't trust the developer. This should be a life lesson, to be honest. But like I said before, the developer has a confirmation bias, right? The developer tells you, yeah, this is how you test my code, or this is what I did, and I think this is the best solution. But of course, the developer is just trying to confirm that his solution is best, right? So challenge it. Challenge the proposed solution, and see if you can perhaps find another way to deal with this problem. And something that I don't really see that often is review using your favorite tool. So you have GitHub, and you have GitLab and BitBucket, and you have the Files Changed tab where you can see all the changes. Why do we go there? Why do we look there? We're used to using PHP Storm, right? Check in. Now, of course, any tool that you prefer. We're used to using that, and why not pull in the changes and just diff it using your favorite tool? You get the exact same view, but you get all of your IDE capabilities. You have your favorite environment, what you're used to, and you can click through, you can see the file structure, you can do a whole lot more than in the damn GitHub interface, right? So start using your own tool. And of course, have a shared vision. This helps a lot with reducing the time of code reviews. If you see that code reviews, trigger discussions, make sure that you have a shared architectural vision across the team, because that'll make discussions a lot less, because you can just refer to, yeah, but we discussed this, and this is the direction we're taking, so everyone's more on the same line. The whole team is aligned. So one way of having this shared vision is architectural exploration, which is something that we just thought of and it's a cool word, it's kind of like a buzzword. But basically what it is you take notes while you're working. So this is just while you're working on the feature, or you take notes from a code review where you're like, okay, so this looks like an issue, but raising it now would just slow down the whole process. So let me just write it down, and I'll get back to it later. Schedule a meeting, but make sure you only schedule it when you need it. This is a trap where you have like these bi-weekly meetings, And at some point, you don't really have the content to fill an hour anymore. So just, if you have enough notes and you feel like, okay, so I feel like there's a lot of stuff going on, there are a lot of questions, maybe we should have a meeting now. And only that way you can have a useful meeting. And time box it. Just do 1 hour, half an hour, 2 hours, whatever you need. Just don't make it 3 hours, that's a bit long. And present and discuss the notes. So make sure that before the meeting you have somewhat of an agenda that points you're going to discuss. And at the end, if there's time left, you can ask for other inputs. So maybe you have some ideas. Maybe someone else found some other pain points that you want to tackle. This is the chance to share that and to think of a solution. And if you find a solution, or if you find, or if more research is the answer, make sure there's an owner. Make sure there's someone who is responsible for the research, so you can keep track of progress. So I asked this question in my survey as well. Why aren't code reviews part of your company's workflow? And this was the result. It's very split, as you can see. 38% says we've never discussed this, which is a shame. I would say if you're part of the 30, I'm not going to ask, if you're part of the 38%, bring it up. Bring it up in a meeting, bring it up with your colleagues, talk about it. If it's a no, that's also fine, but at least discuss it, because it's a great tool of improving a whole bunch of aspects within your team. And then we have the 30% here who says we feel our projects are too small to do code reviews, which is a perfectly valid answer. I'm not saying everyone should do code reviews. There's just certain projects which are low budget and they have like 2 weeks time of development. You don't need to do code reviews. Just think about the return of investment. And then we have 28% here, which makes me sad. Management thinks it's a waste of time and money. So for the 28%, I have some tips on how you can convince your company to do code reviews. So take notes, everyone. In four easy steps, because I wanted to make it sound marketing-y. So first is start the trend. Ask a colleague, hey man, I'm working on this, but I'm a bit lost. Could you review my code and make sure I did it right? And then return the favor. So thank you for reviewing my code. If you ever want me to review your code, I can do it. It takes like a few minutes, like 15 minutes. We can do it right after lunch, right before lunch, when you're not in the flow. And measure the impact. Measure what you find during a code review. You'll be surprised. If you're introducing code reviews for the first time, you'll be surprised how many things you actually find and how many bugs you can actually prevent beforehand. And you want to find bugs as early as possible in the process, because then it takes the least amount of money to fix it. And then show your boss. Some arguments could be it increases the customer satisfaction because you deliver more stable code, so the customer doesn't have to go back and say, you know, I found this issue, I found that issue. Developers learning from each other, also very valuable. There are some companies where developers sort of get stuck at a certain level, and introducing code reviews could be a way for them to start sharing knowledge again and start getting the flow going. And it takes only 15 minutes per feature. I keep track of my time. When I do a PR review, I usually end up in half an hour, which includes a functional review. 15 minutes is not a lot of time. So it's quite easy to implement that without having too much impact on your regular flow. And it's part of the price. Customers are willing to pay for it. At least our customers are. I'm not sure if that counts for everyone. So yeah. Are there any questions?